皆様、本日は東京栄養サミット
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the side event hosted by the Ministry of Agriculture of the Tokyo Nutrition for Growth Summit, building sustainable healthy diets and food systems, aiming to improve nutritional literacy that leads to behavior change. My name is Matsushita from the Ministry of Agriculture. Upon opening this event, we have the Minister of Agriculture, Forestry, and Fisheries, Genjiro Kaneko. Hello, everyone. I would like to express my sincere gratitude for your participation in the Tokyo Nutrition for Growth Summit side event. I would like to share with you a few words as my opening remarks. Today, many people in the world suffer from some form of severe malnutrition, such as 1 in 9 facing starvation and undernutrition, while 1 in 3 are facing obesity. In addition, the global nutritional status has deteriorated further due to the disruption of the supply chain and the economic impact to household consumptions due to the impact of COVID-19. In order to address these issues, policymakers of each country and region must transcend their own standpoints to take action, the realization of a sustainable society free of hunger in which no one is left behind. At the United Nations Food Systems Summit held in September prior to the Tokyo Nutrition for Growth Summit, the Japanese government expressed their importance of achieving both productivity improvement and sustainability, and taking into account the climate and food culture of each country and region in order to build a better food system. The purpose of this event is to follow up on the outcomes of the United Nations Food Systems Summit, bring together diverse stakeholders from Japan and elsewhere to engage in discussions to solve malnutrition issues and realize a healthy and sustainable food system, share their experiences, and map out future contribution measures. Many of the issues related to nutrition in today's world are something that Japan has already been working on, and I believe that there are many hints in Japan that can be applied to other countries and regions, such as promoting a food culture based on a balanced diet. I hope to be able to showcase to the world the outcomes of the two-day side event by compiling an action plan that Japanese food stakeholders can engage in. I would like to conclude my opening remarks with high expectations that this side event will lead to deepening partnerships among stakeholders and promoting international efforts to improve nutrition around the world to build a healthy and sustainable food system. Thank you very much. Now, the UN Food Systems Summit, which was held prior to the Tokyo Nutrition for Growth Summit. We are delighted to welcome Ms. Agnes Kalibata, Special Envoy of the U.S. and Secretary General.
Your Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for inviting me to this year's Nutrition for Growth Summit. I want to thank the government of Japan for your leadership in convening this timely discussion. Over the past 2 years, the UN Food Systems Summit has ambitiously engaged all types of stakeholders across the globe to accelerate action towards more inclusive, sustainable, equitable, and resilient food systems, and to realize the 17 Sustainable Development Goals. At the heart of these efforts, I'm proud to highlight that the Food Systems Summit and the Tokyo Nutrition for Growth Summit have been working collaboratively to advance systems-wide solutions. We share a mutual recognition that malnutrition in all its forms is one of the biggest challenges we face to ensuring optimal health, resilience, prosperity for all, and that sustainable food systems can be a game-changing solution. In September, the Food Systems Summit in New York witnessed countries, civil society, producers, businesses, indigenous people, and youth all coming together to commit to new action to improve nutrition and enable health diets through inclusive, sustainable, resilient food systems. This included the launch of ambitious multi-stakeholder coalitions around healthy diets, blue and aquatic foods, school meals, among others, as well as a call to end hunger and malnutrition in all its forms. We saw strong political will from policymakers to make nutrition a priority across the summit process. Out of 163 countries that made statements at the summit, over 60 have listed nutrition as one of their national food systems priority. 49 have committed to ending hunger, including malnutrition, as the #1 national priority. From New York to Tokyo, we need to carry this momentum and urgency forward. Yesterday, the Food Systems Summit Secretariat convened a special virtual event in support of the Nutrition for Growth Summit, focusing on transforming food systems for better nutrition, health, and prosperity for all. We are thrilled to see how stakeholders from different parts of the world are stepping forward and pledging to accelerate action on nutrition and health. Both the UN Food Systems Summit and the Tokyo Nutrition for Growth Summit serve as a point of departure. And now it's time for action. We stay committed to mainstreaming the food systems approach in this process. We saw strong linkages between the commitments emerging from the two summits. The Food Systems Summit saw over 200 commitments across all constituencies to advance food systems transformation. More importantly, 107 member states submitted pathways committing to transforming their national food systems. Now, we are also seeing smart pledges being made at the Nutrition for Growth Summit to address malnutrition, advance safety, sustainable health food systems. We need to link these commitments to catalyze collective action and show build-up of momentum at country level and regional level. To tackle the underlying causes of food insecurity and all forms of malnutrition, the outcomes of the Nutrition for Growth Summit must be integrated into national food system pathways coming out of the Food Systems Summit. With over 63 national dialogues involving all types of actors, from food chefs to industries to pesticide manufacturers to organic farmers, food marketeers to high scholars, Japan has inspired all of us. It also has delivered an ambitious all-of-society commitment at the Food Systems Summit. Mr. Osawa and National Convener, thank you for moderating us today. You deserve to be applauded. But beyond the Japanese government and stakeholders, I want to turn to all country actors with a simple message. Your remarkable leadership in the lead up to the Food Systems Summit and to the Nutrition for Growth Summit must be sustained in the follow-up. We count on you to show the same boldness and strength in setting in motion sustainable food systems that deliver better nutrition for all. I look forward to the outcomes of the Tokyo Nutrition for Growth Summit and to working with you all on this important agenda as we push towards 2030. Thank you again.
Thank you very much, Dr. Kalibata. This side event is being held for 2 days, including today and tomorrow, with sessions encompassing 7 different themes. And we also have a group of companies, businesses, and organizations with initiatives on nutrition improvement being held at the same time. Now we would like to get started on our first session. The theme of the first session is Trends in Transformation into Sustainable Food Systems after the United Nations Food Systems Summit, Summary of the United Nations Food Systems Summit, and the ideal food system that Japan is aiming for based on the ME-DREE. So first, I would like to introduce the participants for this session. The facilitator is the former Vice Minister for International Affairs of MAFF, and UNFFS convener of Japan and executive advisor of Norinchukin Bank, Mr. Makoto Osawa. Thank you. And now I would like to introduce the panelists. Nippon Biodiesel Fuel Company Limited Director, Ms. Aiko Odachi. FUJI OIL HOLDINGS Assistant CSO and Chair of IMEA Team Leader Sustainable Procurement Committee, Mr. Hiroshi Shinano. WFP Japan Representative Office Representative Naoe Yakiya. Tokyo City University Distinguished Professor Shiro Wakui. SOKA University Faculty of Economics Daisuke Sasagawa. Akita University Faculty of International Resource Sciences Kaito Sugawara. These are our distinguished panelists for this afternoon. So now, the floor is yours. Facilitator, Mr. Osawa, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the kind introduction. This is Osawa, the chair for this session 1. As you heard from Special Envoy, Excellency Kalibata said, there was the food system summit held in September this year. And then from the viewpoint of the SDGs, everything should be sustainable, and this has been the global trend. And therefore, I'd like to explain the background of the summit as well as the discussions. And then let's take a look at what necessary to establish the sustainable food system, and we'd like to look at the global initiatives, and then toward the establishment of the food system, what we have to do. And the university student will give us the new viewpoint from this. Now I'd like to explain the Japanese initiatives as well as the UN Food Summit, just briefly. First of all, the background of the UN Food Summit. There's the so-called planetary boundary, which has been advocated on the global scale, especially as you see on the left-hand side, the pace of the extinction of species as well as the nitrogen and the phosphate cycle is going beyond the high risk. They're reaching to the high risk, going beyond the uncertainties, and therefore EU has published the strategy of farm to fork. As you see here, there are fertilizers and organic agriculture. This type of system is necessary to make agriculture sustainable, and this should be the global standard, and this is the objective of the strategy. Now, let's take a look at the emission of GHG derived from agricultural activities. On the left-hand side, you can see the global emission. And then if you look at the emission of the agriculture and the forest, it accounts for 1/4 of the total global HGG emission. Then the emission from Japan is 1.24 billion tons, accounting for the 4% of the global emission, because the use of land has changed in Japan, because the deforestation of the forest does not exist, almost nil in Japan, and this is contributing the small percentage of the GHG gas emission. In the area of food, health is also important, because food security has been traditionally focused on the quantitative aspect, meaning that there's enough supply. However, recently, the qualitative aspect is now coming to be the focus recently. On the other hand, as you tell from this graph, taking the healthy diet costs money, and therefore many poverty people cannot enjoy the healthy food and diet. And therefore, especially in developing countries, assistance and support should be provided to allow them to grow healthier vegetables and fruits. And there's a discussion on the impact of the food onto the global environment. As you see in this bar graph, Japan exceptionally has given the constellation for the planetary boundary, and planetary health diet is promoted here in Japan. However, out of G20 countries, the second from the bottom, Japan has the second least number of problems in this sense. However, if you look at the current situation of the organic culture, acreage is high. In Western countries, however, Japanese acreage used for the organic agriculture is very small. For example, the Australia is 24% and Japan is just 0.5%. If you look at the organic food consumption per capita per annum, it's very small. Switzerland has spent 40,000, however, Japan has spent only 1,400 Japanese yen per year per capita. Now, if you look at the chemical fertilizer and the chemical agriculture, compared to the Western countries, the use of the chemical agriculture and fertilizer is by far higher because its location of Japan, Japanese archipelago, is located in the high temperature, high humidity Asian monsoon region. That's why now the situation of the food tech investment, in order to resolve many problems, there are more and more investment made into the food technologies. More than 2 trillion Japanese yen per annum is now used. However, compared to the other countries such as US, China, India, and the UK, the amount of money is still small. Against this backdrop, what's necessary for Japan? Environment, food, and agricultural situation on the globe should be also considered in Japan, and based on that, the MAF has developed a strategy for sustainable food system covering all of the steps from production to consumption, and all of the issues will be resolved through innovation. And this strategy has been developed in May 2021, and this can be used as a sustainable food system applicable to entire Asian monsoon. And now Japan is going to take part in the international rulemaking. The specific measures include the production, distribution, and consumption, and procurement. So the procurement step is also included in this strategy. Today's topic is nutrition issue, and you can see there is the pillar related to the nutrition, and expected outcome is the prolongation of the healthy longevity by changing our diet more healthy. And then September, there was the UN Food System Summit held in New York. As you see in this schematics, there are diverse topics discussed in the summit, and both quantitative and qualitative food issues have been discussed. In addition to that, the sustainable food consumption was discussed. The major outcomes include the participation of the summit. As many as 163 countries have participated, and there are more than 440 national dialogues implemented. And furthermore, there are ongoing initiatives, including nutrition issue. And then once in every 2 years, stock-taking meeting will be held. And then the contribution from Japan to this summit, the highest number of national dialogues were held, and 69 companies and organizations have made their commitments regarding the proposal from Japan based on the strategy for strategy food systems. We have registered our food system. And then the Prime Minister has participated in this summit, and Japan is the only one country where as high as Prime Minister level person has attended. There are 2 points in the food system summit. With the consideration for the East Asian countries, we insist that there's no panacea. Innovation is imperative, and the balanced diet is very important. So we advocated these 3 imperative points throughout the system summit. Through the collaboration with related countries, we try to make these 3 pillars reflected into the declaration of the action by the UN Secretary General. For example, the first pillar of there is no panacea applicable to the whole countries. There's the ministerial meeting was held, and at that time, this first pillar was confirmed. That's all for me. And you will hear many tangible initiatives. But without any further ado, I'd like to invite Professor Wakui to share what kind of systems or what kind of impact our food and its consumption may have, and then how we should take the post-COVID-19 society. Now, Dr. Wakui, please.
Thank you very much. So the facilitator, Mr. Osawa, kindly introduced me about the outcomes of the UN Food Systems Summit and also talking about our own sustainable way of agriculture in Japan and its strategies. And I really appreciate the kind introduction. And we all know that after COVID-19, we have to be wary of where the world is headed. So when we talk about one world, one health, so that means if the planet is healthy, then the regional communities and the individuals will also be healthy. This is one concept that people had in mind. And to do so, NBS, the nature-based solutions, must be shared, and the entire world must come together to share this kind of common understanding, sharing this natural filter. And I think that is the kind of thinking that came to the Farm to Fork from the European Union, or how to create the circular systemomy, are all connected to this kind of topic. And I was also chairing the a session in the Ministry of Agriculture for biodiversity, so I was a bit involved in this initiative for a while. And when we talk about nutrition, which is the topic for today, we have to think about the food supply chain and how do we manage and accumulate and synchronize the agricultural data, and how are we to clarify the traceability all the way from production all the way to distribution, so that we can identify what kind of initiatives are being undertaken by each segment in the supply chain, so that we will be able to create a healthy food system in the circular economy. So this is the smart food chain, which we call in the green food strategy. But this is not something that is only available by the initiatives of the producers, but the consumers too must come together and cooperate in this initiative. And the other point is the multifaceted features that agriculture has to begin with. It is not only talking about agriculture, but maybe we should talk about the entire environment. So if a person is involved or engaged in agriculture in that location, this could lead to disaster prevention, or this could lead to the preservation and protection of the entire community of the soil, and also contribute to the absorbability of CO2 in that particular region. So in order to maintain this kind of balanced ecosystem, of course, it will require some costs. And how are we to manage these costs according to the market? Or are we to sever this from the market and try to find a way through subsidies and other financial support, is one challenge that we must face going forward. And we are not only talking about the producers and the distributors, but the consumers also are involved in determining the process of the production and distribution of food items. And we consumers play a major role, and we must be conscious that consumers do actually play a major role in maintaining and also controlling the future of the food system. So if we are to identify what traceability is, these challenges will become revealed and will become very clear. And we have to think of how we are to think of this as an entire wholesome system. And on the other hand, when we talk about food culture, especially when we talk about the food culture of Japan, we have a lot of accumulated know-how. And we also believe that Japanese food culture clearly is the blessing from nature. And in the Edo period, Ando Shoheki, who was the scholar of those times, even mentioned that a human person is part of nature. And we have to really keep in mind that If you are a human being, you are living and you are contributing and living together with nature. And that is the philosophy that you must have. And there was also belief that there are certain crops and items that need to be produced in a certain location. And when we say itadakimasu, which is a Japanese culture of saying grace to the food before actually consuming it, this is a very precious culture that has been passed down from our ancestors. And in the Edo period, we used to be eating a lot of different kinds of food stuff. And we have what we call the 5 crops, gokoku. And today, actually, we are only eating maybe at most 2 of the 5 crops. So when we really think of the kind of food culture that we have had, and if we look back on history, we need to learn more and more from our predecessors. When we talk about organic foods and organic agriculture, we have to also once again review what our ancestors used to consume in the old days, the crops that were in line with the climate and culture of that given community. And we have to really focus on the optimization of each community or farmland. This is not only for Japan, but from my experience, in 2010, we had the COP10 conference in Nagoya in Aichi Prefecture. And at that time, we had kicked off what we call the Satoyama Initiative. What this was that the world needs to really fit into nature and live together with nature. And that is the philosophy that we wanted to share with the world, because this is a traditional Japanese philosophy of living together with nature, of understanding the uniqueness of the local agricultural community. And this way, we will also be able to deepen the continuity of the local production. At that time, people really were unfamiliar with this terminology called Satoyama. And some people try to describe this as a production land system, and it was very difficult to understand. But nowadays, the word Satoyama has become to be recognized as one terminology that can be shared by others. And I think this will become a huge, significant hint to people from other countries. So we also have to look at the cultural aspects when we talk about food culture. That is my opinion. Thank you very much for listening. Thank you very much, Mr. Wakui. So when we talk about the entire world, and in a COP conference where people come together for this kind of initiative, and you also shared with us the unique traditions that we have been passed on to us from our ancestors in the Edo period. And you kindly mentioned about this entire process originating from production all the way to distribution and consumption. And you also mentioned the importance of traceability. And you also stated that it is important to think about costs. And also, we have to revisit the traditional food culture that has been passed on. You also mentioned the Satoyama Initiative, which Japan came to present to the world at COP10 in Nagoya. And I think this was a lot to cover in a very short time. So going forward, we would like to keep this in mind and also listen to what the students have to say regarding this, because this is an occasion to think about the future of how we are to create a sustainable society, and we have to make sure that we are reflecting the ideas of the youngsters. So Sasagawa-san from SOKA University and Sugawara-san from Akita University are here with us this afternoon. So starting from Sasagawa-san, I would like to ask him for a brief introduction, what you are interested in, and also your opinions, please.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Daisuke Sasagawa, the first grader of the Department of Economics of SOKA University. First of all, let me express my sincere gratitude to giving me such an opportunity. I'd like to share what I have learned at the university, and I'd like to share the commitment for the future. At the university, I have majored the development policy because there's one event happened. It happened when I been to the Philippines and I saw all these street children. I believe I have known well to the poverty situation of the Philippines. However, when I encountered them and I was asked to offer the food, it was really struggling not to know them well. If I give food, yes, the hunger can be alleviated at one point. However, it does not help for them to free from the poverty, and therefore I try to grow the local industries or businesses. At the same time, the cheap and high quality processed food should be imported into the developing countries. However, it's just the transient benefit, and it may deteriorate the local businesses, and therefore important thing is to support the local food business and the forestry businesses to generate employment and then continuously sustainable improvement of the health. This is the most important point for developing countries. Now, let me share the opinion from the viewpoint of a student. There are many policies initiated by the government of Japan, such as the strategy for sustainable food systems. However, for me, the viewpoint of the food security is very important because it goes beyond the supply of the enough food. Healthy life without any diabetes and other diseases should be prevented. Such qualitative aspect is very important, not only the quantitative aspect of the supply. In developing countries, malnutrition is just one piece of the problems, but the so-called the high-income lifestyle comes to be the problem. What's important here is, as I have mentioned, my personal agenda is also related here, meaning that just a simple supply of the food is not enough. The community or local people centered the growth is all the more important by supporting their own businesses. And then Dr. Wakui mentioned that due to COVID-19, there are many impacts onto the food systems. Thank you very much for sharing your insights. What's impressive to me is the constellation to the environment, where we consider the cost and how we incur the external and economic factors. Not only the consumers, but many stakeholders are involved, and therefore, as you pointed out, the partnership will be all the more important. And based on that premise, the actions for the external and economic factors should be incorporated into the system. For example, one can be seen in the carbon tax, and therefore, with this approach, the economic factors can be internalized to the system. Of course, there are many other issues we have to work on, but including consumers, we have to set the forum where all of the stakeholders can get together to identify the compromise points into the system. And I believe this kind of dialogue is also necessary. That's all, and thank you very much for your kind attention. Thank you very much. You have emphasized the importance point of the qualitative aspect and how external factors should be internalized into the system. Thank you very much for sharing such points based on your own experiences in Philippines. Now, I'd like to invite Mr. Akihara from Sugawara from Akita University to share your view. Thank you very much. I have not had much experiences, and therefore I am the one who have to learn as much as possible in this kind of occasion. I belong to the Natural Resource Science faculty of Akita University, and I'm the fourth grader. Last year, I established the company focusing on the elderly people. I'm still a student, and therefore please bear with me. In order to provide the support for the elderly people at home, I established a company, ①Mr, in December. And then, with the perspective of SDGs, there are some problems that only the national level system alone cannot resolve. And that's why I try to provide the support for the elderly who live at their own homes. Nutrition problem is not felt in daily life in my impression. For example, when I look at my friends, if we go to supermarkets and restaurants, if we work at them, probably we see the waste and distribution related issues. However, if we are not in such positions, probably we cannot feel that the food is our issues. And we haven't had such opportunities where we can hear the insights from the expert. And therefore, when I work for the elderly people, even in Akita Prefecture, the Akita community had they trend to take a higher level of salt intake, and therefore we try to reduce the salt intake as much as possible. Several years ago, in order to resolve the issue of high salt intake, the restaurant where the low salt content was offered. However, because of the taste, this restaurant went bankrupt. So, as Professor Wakui mentioned, the food culture is also important because the healthy diet also has to be also has to have the food culture. So, depending on the food culture in that community, we have to consider food issues. Then, in addition to that, as Dr. Osawa mentioned, food tech. Because I'm the business owner, therefore, where the investment goes, I'm concerned about it, needless to say. However, in Japan as a whole, nutrition and related issues do not attract so much sense of urgency. And therefore, the protein bars and the insect diets are now popular. In addition to that, and frozen food has come to be popular to make food available longer. However, different from Japanese trend, the cultural meat is now seriously considered to tackle the issue of food scarcity, and this has generated new businesses. And therefore, depending on the food cultures, the businesses are different and the investment amount is different. And therefore, if I go back to the previous point, how much we can have the sense of urgency, how much we can identify these issues as our own issues, this is very important. And therefore, I'd like to work on this point. That's all. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. In Akita Prefecture, you established your own company to work for the elderly. Thank you very much for sharing such experiences. In addition to that, based on your own experiences, you touched upon the presentations of Professor Wakui and others, and then you touched upon the local perspective of Akita region and global. Thank you very much. Now I'd like to move on to the next. So next, especially in developing countries, how Japanese companies have worked on this from the perspective of food system. Now I'd like to introduce these people from the companies, how Japan and its companies can make the contributions, and where do we have to pay attention. I believe everyone can learn from their experiences. First of all, I'd like to invite Ms. Odachi from Nippon Biodiesel Fuel Corporation Limited to share the experiences in Africa.
Thank you very much for your kind introduction. My name is Aiko Odachi from Nippon Biodiesel Fuel Company Limited. So today we would like to talk about agriculture innovation platform in Africa and small smart community. So please kindly look at the screen. So here it says agricultural innovation platform in Africa and small smart community. And this is my presentation. So we have been in Africa for 10 years in Mozambique. In 2012, we have established a local office in Mozambique, and we have been producing energy in rural villages. And this is something that we have been working in conjunction with the farmers. And we are purchasing the produce, and then we are refining them. And we are also contributing to the local employment and providing the necessary infrastructure to the villages. And of course, this is something that we are looking at an area where we have many farmers, So we buy the agricultural products from the farmers and we sell them to the urban areas. Going to the next slide. This is how we are showing how we treat biofuel fuel. So there are very little grid electricity in these communities, and the local farmers have very little or limited access to the grid, and they do not know about the pricing system, and the transportation infrastructure is almost non-existent. So there is almost no value chain. So the biggest issue was who is making what kind of crop in what area. That kind of information was not available. And this is something that you can observe while you walk around on foot. But it was not possible to systematically understand who is making what in those areas. And also, when the farmers want to expand their farm space and when they have the motivation to expand their business, they still lack information and they lack the credit. And therefore, they had a lot of issues in the financing areas. So there is no grid power, so we started with this kind of small solar panel, and we have utilized the NFC card where you can have financial transactions offline without the electricity. And also, this also records the transaction digitally on the card, so this also clarifies the issue of traceability. And so we have been working with the UN World Food Program, and previously the transaction was all done on paper by vouchers, but if you kindly skip the slide, as you can see here, these are the kind of cards that we have been using. By digitalizing the subsidies, this is what we have been doing. And from this kind of experience, we have more and more farmers who are able to access information about production as well as business, and they are also able to understand more about the value chain. And by making a digital platform of the producers, we will be able to disseminate more information. And in Mozambique and Senegal, this is an example of the activities we are doing in those countries. And as you can see on the slide, we are providing tablets, if not mobile phones, that can be shared by each group. And we do not provide these devices to each individual, but this is something that also is linked with the history of Japan's agricultural cooperatives, because if you focus on the individual, the amount you produce is very limited. So by sharing the mobile device or the tablet, you create a group and have the leader manage the tablet. So even if it's one individual, you do not have even credit for $100 worth, but you have 10 people and you can add up to $1,000 worth of credit and you'll be able to have more credit. And with a group, you will be able to engage yourself and your group in more effective agricultural production. And this is the agricultural working group. That is something that we are working in tandem with the Ministry of Agriculture and JICA in Africa. And in TICAD 7 conference, this was identified as IPA, Agricultural Digital Platform for Africa. And we just spoke about the digital platform which manages the business transactions. This is indicated in the orange box in the middle. And this is where we have expectations for participation and contribution by Japanese businesses. So on the right-hand side, we have boxes such as finance and agro-machinery. But these are the areas where the experiences and know-hows accumulated by Japanese companies will be shared. And we have been engaged in manufacturing various types of agro-machinery, but Japanese businesses are familiar with what kind of information can be identified where. And at the same time, the Japanese businesses will be able to connect to the information of the small-scale farmers in this particular community or area so that the companies can provide more accurate type of contribution or assistance. And in the green area, as Mr. Osawa mentioned earlier, This is where the Japanese government and the Japanese Ministry of Agriculture have been engaged in various types of initiatives and inputting the necessary information. This is also being undertaken by the Agricultural Digital Platform. So this is an example of how the businesses as well as the public sector in Japan have been working in tandem to provide assistance to African farmers. And we are not only looking at the state-of-the-art agro machinery, but we are looking at the level of help needed by each village. So for example, if a village has no grid power, then we need to provide them with specific know-how so that they can learn more about starting from a small area. So we have a lot of variations in the types of assistance that we provide. And this is about small community, small smart community. So this is something that is being done in tandem with IPA at TICAD 8. And this is the model that we are talking about. So it is not only talking about the digital platform, but we need to make sure that the village and the social life of the village is going around. And it is not about creating a big town, but when we talk about solar panels and electric power towers, we bring those basic infrastructure to the middle of the village and then exchange information through this digital platform so that the farmers will be able to have more access to more effective information and educate the farmers. And when we talk about digital alone cannot resolve all the issues. So this is a model that Japan has been going through the Japanese Farmers Association. And in each community, we have been creating the local culture and pathways that are unique to each agricultural community or village. That is the tradition that we have been experiencing in Japan. And sharing information is necessary. And even if you are able to generate money, many people will be motivated to move to urban areas with that money. So in order to prevent that kind of move, we have to invest in the local community and provide culture and entertainment in the very local community. So to TICAD 8, we are not only focusing on a digital platform, but we are also looking at small, smart community to work in tandem with the digital platform. And this will provide a pathway for a sustainable type of village management and also sharing information and community building. So these are the key components that we are focusing on en route to the TICAD 8. So this was a very quick way of showing to you what we have been doing. And of course, we not only want to contribute to agricultural production in the world, but we also need to look at the whole variety of agricultural production taking place in the world. Thank you very much. So providing agricultural assistance to Africa seems to be a lot to cover, but you mentioned that you are using the state-of-the-art digital technology, as well as looking back at Japanese traditional rural traditions of the agricultural community, which become hints for development in Africa. And now we would like to hand the microphone to Mr. Shinano, because we are a company that imports a lot of food from overseas. And securing raw materials for the foodstuff is very important for the Japanese economy. And he will be talking about sustainability initiatives.
Thank you very much, Mr. Osawa, for your kind introduction, and I also appreciate for giving me this kind of opportunities. Thank you very much. Now, without any further ado, I'd like to start my presentation. There are many raw materials for agriculture, but now Japan have to rely on the imports, and then there's the human rights and the global issues. And therefore, the traceability of the raw materials is very important as one of the corporate activities. the more than 50% revenue comes from the overseas markets, and therefore sustainable procurement of raw materials is very important, and it may be determine our survival in the future. Our raw materials include soybean, cacao, palm oil, and other agricultural products, and there are many issues. And therefore, today, I'd like to focus on the most heavily consumed palm oil on the globe, and I'd like to share the part of our actions and initiatives focusing on the palm oil. Explosive growth of the population has steadily pushed up the production of palm oil because the unit production is very high. In addition to that, the stable yield is another benefit, and therefore we have promoted to use palm oil to contribute to the entire food. Having said that, environment, the human rights are the issues for the palm oil production, and therefore for these severe issues we have to take upon them, and therefore we established the responsible procurement policy in 2016, under which 3 commitments have been published. First commitment, no deforestation. Commitment 2, no new development in the peatland. Commitment 3 is no exploitation of the indigenous community and the labor people of the laborers. So this is what we call NDPE in short. First of all, I'd like to show the supply chain because we put together a streamlined supply chain as the first step. The primary certification, there are 2 offices and there were 21 supply-related companies, and then there's the upstream companies and the farms, and we streamline them. Regarding the farms, there are large-scale farms and there are small-scale farms. The number is by far the higher in the small-scale farmers. And then on the right-hand side, you can see the processing company, and the 11 companies are plotted as part of the downstream companies to ensure traceability to be linked to the upstream. Then up until the purification company, traceability is established. Right now, up until the farm is now being worked on to extend the traceability, and therefore right now coverage is 71%, but in 20-something, we'd like to achieve 100% coverage. And there are more than 1 activities for the supply chain improvement. For example, the Malay Peninsula Labor Environment Improvement Program, together with the NPO in the province of Sabah, we provided the support to obtain an RSPO certificate. Then in the southern Sumatra Island, we collaborate with the local communities as well as the local governments to establish the consortium to promote the landscape initiative. I'd like to talk more about this landscape initiative and the northern Sumatra. Northern Sumatra, there's a large lucerne ecosystem which is quite famous. Under the leadership of the environment and NPO, there were 2 zones where we provided the support. Because of the higher level of the satellite, we can measure the field with very high precision, and it can reduce the deforestation quite a lot. Not only that, we try to increase the income by changing the agriculture approach. So the changing from monoculture, intercropping of fruits are now used. And then if the field is destructed, the seedling and fruit seeds are provided by us to make the land fertile once again. Together with the Aceh local government and NPO's efforts are imperative to promote this initiative. The design of these activities are all finalized in June 2020 based on the KPI up until 2030. And in order to achieve NDPE as the final goal, we review outcomes year by year to prudently facilitate these initiatives. Now we have a grievance system We established it in 2018, and we make a revision in 2018 or 2020. Sorry, the most of the grievances and complaints are related to the NGO submitting environmental issues, and we have disclosed these grievance deals, grievance cases one by one. So if you are interested in that, please take a look at our website. Now, one of the hot issue is legislation in Europe. Most of the European countries have taken actions and asked for companies to be responsible for the environmental or human rights issues. For example, Netherlands, Germany, France, and the UK, they do have the domestic legislation put in place or being put in place, as you know. Now, as a whole EU framework, there's the prevention of deforestation due diligence draft. The other is the environmental human rights due diligence. In the 17th of November, the basic law was issued where due diligence is incorporated. The scope is soybean, cow, beef, palm oil, woods, cacao, and coffee. These are the 6 items covered in this draft. In the United States, tariff as well as the Border Control Office or CBP, if they identify the palm oil that violates the human rights, they prohibit the import of such oil. Therefore, if the Japanese company has the manufacturing the site in overseas countries, we have to take actions immediately. Thank you very much. On the global stage, if you want to operate your businesses, you have to have the consideration to the environment, to the earth. Otherwise, you cannot survive. Especially for oil, this is essential food for our lives. So we, Japan, has to consume imported oils through those business activities. We are definitely involved in the global supply chain, so we have to be aware of that. Now, last year, WFP was awarded with Nobel Prize, and then I'd like to invite Ms. Yakiya from Japanese office of WFP to share the vision.
Thank you very much, Mr. Osawa, for your introduction. My name is Naoe Yakiya from the WFP Japan Representative Office. So I am delighted to be able to share our activities that we have been undertaking at the Japan's WFP. So please turn to the slide. So the international society has been looking at sustainable development, and we have a whole objective of a UN Decade of Action on Nutrition so that we will be able to eradicate all forms of malnutrition by 2030. So that is why we are looking at striving at initiatives to provide food at a cheaper cost. And today and this year, we have been holding the Japan Nutrition for Growth Summit as well as the UN Food Systems Summit. So a lot of initiatives are underway. And in the WFP, we are looking at the second goal of the SDGs of eradicating all forms of malnutrition. And for more than 50 years, we have been providing a lot of initiatives and providing a lot of emergency aid in the world. And this year, we have more than 100 million people receiving aid in more than 80 countries in the world. So we are the largest humanitarian aid organization, and we have more than 140 people working on the field. And from our long experience, we are very familiar with the ways to provide assistance in these kinds of areas. And last year, WFP was delighted to receive the Nobel Peace Prize, and we have been contributing to the improvement of food situations in war-stricken areas, and providing food support became the power to motivate those people to stand up from the ashes. And after the 2010s, the United Nations have revisited the strategic values of providing food assistance. So what are the differences in the types of aid that we have been providing? So food aid was something that the UN has been engaged in since its very foundation, and we have been providing access food to those people in need all over the world. And food assistance is for people who need food support for a longer term. And we look at the actual needs of those people and look into each situation to provide what kind of assistance that the UN should be providing. So this kind of food assistance is something that the UN has been engaged in. And WFP has been the largest humanitarian aid organization in the world, and we have been evolving throughout the years. And we believe that starvation or hunger has some kind of cause. So WFP is not something where we provide support just on the spot, but we are looking at multiple years so that we will be able to provide solution to the fundamental causes of what is causing the hunger and starvation. So we are looking at this overall or greater objective. And when we look at emergency aid, this is not something that just comes and goes, but in the UN food program, we want to provide food as quickly as possible to those people who need the food. And we also want to make sure that we are at the same time reducing the number of people who are seriously in need of food assistance. And once they are able to come out of this emergency, then we also provide support for more independence of providing employment and helping them with their lifestyles and secure the food security for those people so that those people will be able to periodically take in nutrition and be cut off from the malicious cycle of hunger and starvation so that they will become part of the supply chain of the overall cycle of producing food and consuming food. And for those people who are in vulnerable situations, food is not just a source of nutrition, but it is also a means to leap into a better form of lifestyle. And looking at the inclusiveness and the variety of food cultures, we are working with various private sectors as well as other organizations to promote sustainable development of the local areas. And the power of the private business sector has a lot of potential. And this is a very important partnership that the WFP has all over the world. And WFP and GAIN have been engaged in Sun Business Network, or SBN, in which Japanese companies are also engaged in, and we are providing business support in 27 countries. And in the Tokyo Nutrition for Growth Summit, we are planning to establish the SBN Japan office. So we want to further promote and provide assistance to this kind of nutrition improvement initiative so that more and more people will be able to stand on their own feet and go forward. Next slide, please. WFP also has the Innovation Accelerator within its own organization, and we are looking at new types of innovation accelerators in our organization where we work in tandem with the Japanese government as well as the Japanese private sector. And in addition, WFP is also involved in many projects outside of the network of Japanese companies in very isolated areas of the world. So WFP has a very strong network. The population of people in starvation and hunger are on the increase from 2020, especially after the expansion of COVID-19 from 2019. And it has a maximum of 811 million people, which is a great increase from the previous year. So that means 1 out of 10 people in the world are suffering from hunger. So the road and pathway to a world without hunger is very far away. And this is not something that can be attained just by working with one organization alone. So in order to realize a world without hunger by 2030, we have to work with the civil community as well as with local governments and the private sector so that we can identify a permanent solution going forward. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. So not providing assistance and not from just food aid. This is kind of evolution that you have been taking place. And I think this is something that is also connected to what Sasagawa-san mentioned. And also the partnership with the private sector is another important point, which is something that Odachi-san mentioned. So today we had various people come in and speak from their own standpoints, and it was very informative. So just to wrap up all of the discussions, now we would like to open the floor to discussions as well as to the people who are here in the audience today so that we can exchange our opinions. And when we look at the world and see what is taking place in the world, and when we look at the Japanese people, individuals who are engaged in this kind of initiative in the world, these are some of the scenes that we saw this afternoon. But once again, if we think as what Japan can do to contribute to the improvement of the continuity and sustainability of the food system, what kind of comments that you might have? And in order to resolve these fundamental issues, maybe private partnership is one thing, and who pays the cost was another question that was raised. So we would like to discuss about these important topics. So first, to Professor Wakui, please. Yes, it was a very interesting way of introducing the kind of discussions that need to be taking place, and it was very informative, and I thank you for that. What I am really concerned about is that the world population is now at 7.5 billion. So when I turned 50 years old, world population was 5 billion. And when I'm 60, it's 6 billion. And when I'm 70, it's 7 billion. And at 75, I'm at 7.5 billion. So if I live until 100, it will become 10 billion. So the big question is, I think what is most important is that even if the economy grows, the life capacity of the Earth will not continue growing. So this 6,400 kilometers, so if you have like 30 kilometers of livable space, and where a lot of the creatures can really vividly live, is a really thin layer of only 3 kilometers. So it's a thin layer of air, and I think that is the small world that we must all live in. And we have been damaging this environment, and the biggest cause of that is that we have this very extreme way of population growth. And if we continue to expand cultivated land on the earth, then we will bump into the CO2 matters and the carbon emissions. And I think it is impossible to continue expanding farmland. And when we look at meat consumption, then we have to also look at raising food crops to feed to the livestock. So we really have to think about the kind of ethics that we need to focus on going forward. And I think that is key. So what I wanted to mention is that I proposed going back to our original culture that was passed down from our ancestors. So we first need to go back to basics and look back at our culture. And it is not an issue that is only confronted by Japan, but it is an issue for the entire world. And Japan has gone through many, many natural disasters, and we have accumulated a lot of know-how and knowledge of overcoming those disasters. And now it is time for us to share this kind of information with the world. That is another important key. And we also heard about the interesting stories from FUJI Oil Holdings. So when we look at how we can localize the Japanese system, so to speak, that we have incubated to the other countries and other regions. So in any event, I think the world will be fighting for shares in the world, and the world could become rather unstable for the sake of food. Now, we need to prevent that from happening, and how do we do that is something we have to discuss. That is all for me. So thank you very much. So we have about 20 more minutes, if I am correct, And then we have another 5 minutes to wrap up at the very end. So for the last 5 to 10 minutes, we would like to also open up for comments from the floor. So we have another 5 to 10 minutes to listen to comments from the panelists. And the last people, as an obligation, we will be looking at the 2 student representatives. So we have 3 more people. So now either you can raise your hand or I can pick on any of you, but do we have any volunteers who would like to speak? So Odachi-san, please. Thank you very much. So as Mr. Wakui just mentioned, and also when we talk about all these issues, this is something that I missed in my presentation, but when we talk about responsibility, the consumers too have to look at what kind of production, where the consuming item is coming from. I think that is something that changes the power of the consumer. And also the producers have to be able to show what kind of initiatives the producers have been taking, what kind of diligence that the producers have been engaged in. And in the old days, we did not have the information or the technology, and we would only find out after the lapse of time. But now, as we face this issue, by optimizing digital power, we should focus on traceability and also focus on the initiatives that have been undertaken by the producers. And I think that is where the consumers need to educate themselves with such useful information. So utilizing this kind of technology and technical savvy is what I would like to propose. Thank you very much. Okay, Shinano-san, please.
As Professor Wakui mentioned, the ethics and the culture is very important. I cannot agree them anymore because so far in the industry, explosive population growth, we tried to work on that and we tried to manufacture as much as possible by increasing the yield as well as the yield per unit of land. This has been the focus alone. However, unfortunately, as a result of that, we have incurred a huge damage onto the earth, and we have to seriously take this issue as our own. We have to accelerate the discussion, especially for the biodiversity. And I believe a huge shift onto the biodiversity will happen. And of course, the global temperature increase is a problem, needless to say, but why it has happened? It's due to the lack of biodiversity, and this is the most important issue. And therefore, the discussion on the biodiversity should be accelerated to reach the crux of the issue. Thank you. Thank you very much. Now, can I ask you, Ms. Yakiya?
Well, this issue of starvation and hunger and the food system, so these are all global issues that we must confront. And it is not something that is happening somewhere else, but we have to realize that it is right in front of us. And in Japan, if you live in this country, many people might feel that it is not really something that has to do with your own lives. But we live in a borderless world, and that is not the case. So things that are going on in the world are actually happening right in front of our eyes. And we should not only focus on the negative aspects, but we have to look at the global issues. And by challenging these global issues, it's also an opportunity for each and every single one of us. So when we look at nutrition issues and the food systems, when we look at the relationships with the developing countries, for the more low-income countries, you might think that you need low technology or you do not need state-of-the-art technology, but that is not so. By providing them with the latest technology, we'll be able to do things more effectively. But at the same time, it's not only about always providing high-spec and almighty type of technology to those countries. So you have to really look at the real needs and customize to their needs and try to also locally source a lot of the elements and contribute to the local economy. And that is the kind of innovation that we should be pushing through, and also share a lot of the technology, experiences, and knowledge that have been accumulated in the private sector as well. And I think we should put all of these efforts together to contribute to this kind of initiative. So this is where the civil society and the government need to come together to tackle these kinds of global issues. So we need to look at new perspectives, and we want to take a look at new ways of doing things together. Thank you very much. Yes, so the four of those people who just mentioned it, do we have anybody who would like to once again speak or add something? No? Okay, now we would like to turn to the two students over here. So now it is your turn. So now I would like to turn to Mr. Sugawara. Please, can you please speak?
Sure, thank you very much. Digitalization can be helpful because it can identify many things. Therefore, the digitalization can be used in bad ways and good ways because we can know the global as well as the domestic issues. And if those are things interested students and other people, it will be good. And I myself have felt it keenly. Thanks to that, and I have now know the many issues, global issues, including the food. Having said that, however, although we can know many things, but not, because we can know many things, too many things, therefore we cannot take action. And I believe there are more and more such people who know well but cannot take action, especially for the food issue. We delve into this issue, and then we find other related issues such as the climate change and the global issues, because all of them are intertwined. And therefore, we have to make the integrated decision by considering all of them as a whole. And then in the framework of the capitalism, how much we can do, there is still a question mark, at least to me, because in the framework or limitation of the capitalism, to what degree we can work on them, and we have to pay attention to that. Thank you very much, Mr. Sugawara. Now, thank you very much for waiting. It's your turn, Mr. Sasagawa. Thank you very much. I'd like to share 2 points. First of all, as Professor Wakui pointed out, the population growth has been and will be inevitable. However, there's the limitation of the available land, and then we will end up with talking about the higher productivity. And then Ms. Odachi mentioned at the very end of the supply chain, there are agriculture farmers, and then improvement of the technology is what they want to do. However, because of the lack of trust, they cannot enjoy the bank loan, for example, and that's why they cannot improve technologies, and this is the issue, in my view. So microfinance institutions, for example, have worked on this issue for the past decades. Microfinancing institutions have taken actions to resolve this issue. There are some areas where this issue has been resolved. Still, the efforts and initiatives are not sufficient. And then off-grid windows in your remark, I'm so impressed because the issue of traceability, this is really good. Off-grid works well. And then there is not enough financing provided to the small-scale farmers. That's why we have to galvanize the private sector technologies as much as possible. Now, the point 2, the PPP, a private public partnership. Recently, Japanese food industry especially has entered into the sub-Saharan. They could not take the entry into the sub-Saharan region because of the poor infrastructure, and then WFP and MIGAP of the World Bank have provided the support, including the financing to private sectors. There are many such organizations, and therefore you can use it. As your supporter, you have to leverage it. If you go into the areas where infrastructures or investments are not sufficient, because not by using that, you can establish your own supply chain, and I believe this will be all the more important in the future. Thank you very much. Now, Ms. Yakiya, do you have any comments?
Thank you very much. I totally agree with you because also in Africa, we still have many more room for Japanese companies to come and help. But as WFP, We are really looking forward and have high expectations for the technologies held by the private sector. And we are an innovation accelerator, so we are looking forward to welcoming more startups and more innovative companies. And we have a system of where people will be able to invest in this kind of initiatives, and we also have the support from the Japanese government. So this is an initiative where the public sector and the private sector can come together, and we are just recently starting to get started on these kinds of initiatives. So we want to go forward with this kind of win-win initiative. Thank you very much. So now I would also like to welcome some comments from the audience on the floor. So if you have any questions or comments or opinions that you would like to share, please let us know. Thank you very much. So Tanaka-san, please also mention your name and organization and come forward. So my name is Tanaka, and this was very an informative session, and especially when we look at Japan biofuel. This is a question addressed to Odachi-san, but when it comes to Japanese businesses, we are a company that is engaged in soil improvement and soil research, and we do have some advanced technologies. But when we think of this in terms of food value chain, I think several companies have to work together. So from Odachi-san, do you have any advice about how we are to do this? What kind of initiative that would you suggest? Thank you very much. So maybe I did not explain enough, but we are working with the Ministry of Agriculture, and we are working together for the preparation of TICAD 8, and we have the Agricultural Working Group. And this is what I mentioned in my presentation. And so we are looking at the digital platform base. And this is not involving only one company, but we are inviting many, many businesses and their experiences and knowledges that can contribute to the development of the rural community in Africa. So if you can kindly register to the Agricultural Working Group, you'll be able to become part of this initiative. And we have periodical meetings being held, and you are more than welcome to come attend those sessions. And for the African working groups, even in one single country, things differ from one region to another. So even if you have one technology, depending on the location or the region, the way your technology will be utilized will be different from one place to another. So that is why we need more information and technology from Japanese partners. Thank you very much. Do we have any other comments? So another point, this is not a question, but I would like to share some information. But Sasagawa-san mentioned, Sugawara-san mentioned about the potential of capitalism and working in tandem with the UN organizations. So just one example, we have DSM here with us, and I think DSM would also like to share some of the initiatives that they are doing. So Maruyama-san, please kindly share your information, please. Excuse me. So we are a company based in Holland, and we are a bioscience company called DSM, and I am representing the Japanese branch, and my name is Maruyama. And I am greatly delighted to be participating in today's session. So just one comment that is related to what we heard in the presentations. So just as an example, I would like to share an example. So the private sector, how can these private companies participate in this kind of discussion? What we are doing is we have a company called Africa Improved Food. This is a joint venture with the Rwandan government. And so we establish a state-of-the-art facility, and we employ locals, and we procure local materials and sell locally. So this is a whole business model that is based locally, and we improve the lifestyles and life levels of the local community. And the key point here is we want to also make this business profitable locally. We started this in 2016. It was a new business. And finally, this year, we are breaking even, finally. So if it becomes more profitable, then you will be able to start adding more flagship stores. And then we talk about continuity and sustainability. And Yakiya-san is here with us, the World Food Program. But we have also been working with the World Food Program. We have a partnership with them. And so when you produce something now, the question is, where do you sell them? And if you encounter that kind of question, then you have to first identify a market to sell those products. And for Africa Improved Foods, we have the World Food Program and other humanitarian organizations all involved, and they become our first customers, seeing from the company side. So they come in as customers. That is how we got started with our business. So from a business person's standpoint, this is very familiar, but this kind of business model or business methodology is actually quite common or usable not only in Africa, but also in Asian countries. So we also talked about providing support, from providing support to providing aid. But this all comes together in our mind. Thank you very much for sharing with us a very precious example. So now it is about time to close. So let me wrap up this session very simply. So we have a lot of constructive comments, and we have identified several key words in this afternoon's session. So in our discussions today, we talk about how we are following up on the Food System Summit. So we're not only focusing on nutrition alone, but we have also looked at other challenges taking place in the world by looking at the kind of initiatives taking place in different parts of the world. And the first keyword was the word borderless. So this is a global issue that is common to everybody. So we might be looking at different locations, but the scope of the problem might differ from space to place. It could be a problem about food procurement, but at the end of the day, it is all connected to our daily lives in Japan as well. So borderless was one keyword. And we put in a lot of initiatives, but visualizing the initiatives is another key point of having all the stakeholders work in tandem. That was another key aspect that we covered. And also providing support and providing people to become more independent by recognizing the diversity of the local communities so that each and every single community will be able to stand up on their own feet was another aspect that we mentioned. And also we talked about utilizing culture and traditional values. We're now in the world of globalization, and people might believe that these traditional things are very obsolete. However, in reality, we look at the local cooperatives. We talked about food culture. So this kind of traditional Japanese cultural experiences and traditions can also be revisited and used in a positive manner. And from the two university students, they both mentioned that they will take this problem seriously so that they can work with the world to think of solutions and to overcome fundamental issues. And we have a growing number of students who are interested in this kind of issue, but we have a challenge of what kind of steps they should actually be taking. So today we have people representing different generations, and it is a common issue by everybody, and it is something that we should all come together hand in hand. So for the individual issues, we will also discuss deeper in our ensuing sessions. But here I would like to wrap up this session, our first session in the afternoon. Thank you very much for your attendance and attention.